Hi, I'm Sana with Abundance Rising Family. Welcome to my kitchen. I am always in the kitchen. With 10 children, 9 of them boys, I cook a lot. And I really prefer to make a lot of our foods from scratch and as nutrient dense as possible. So today, I am going to make the boys a treat. We're making some cinnamon rolls. I'd like to bring you along and show you how to make it as nutritious as possible while still providing a really nice treat for them. Come along, let's get started. I buy my wheat berries through Your Standards. I just got done picking up an order, so I have a brand new 50-pound bag of hard red wheat. This is my favorite wheat to use for cinnamon rolls, for sandwich bread, for pizza bread, for all kinds of things. I just opened it. Take a look at those gorgeous wheat berries. Let's turn them into some delicious cinnamon rolls. The first thing we need to do is mill our wheat berries into flour so that we can start our dough. Because there's so many of us, I always double the recipe. Yes, always. So I'm going to go ahead and use this is a 4-cup measuring cup. I fill it to the top and it still may not be quite enough to double my recipe for the cinnamon rolls. But if we need to, we'll just mill a little bit more. I purchased the Whisper Mill by Wonder Mill. Now let me tell you, it may be called a whisper mill, and it is quieter than most electric mills out there you can buy, but it's not quiet. Don't let the name fool you. So we're gonna take off the lid. This is where the flour gets deposited. We're gonna plug it into its outlet. And the first thing we need to do is make sure that it's set to the bread setting. On the Whisper Mill, there's pastry, bread, or coarse. The pastry setting is better for finer flours, or even things like your pie crust, or even pancakes are really good on pastry, but for bread, the bread setting really is best for our family's tastes. We're gonna turn it on first. And we can pour the entire 4-cup measuring cup of wheat berries in there. It can handle all of it. So now we disconnect it. Pop it open. And we have some beautiful, finely milled, fresh milled wheat. There's a lot of different recipes that you can use for making cinnamon rolls. My favorite recipe to use, I have found, is actually my sandwich bread recipe. I just roll it out and turn it into the cinnamon rolls that we were wanting to eat. So I'm going to show you the basic steps that I go through for fresh milled flour cinnamon rolls. We have the fresh milled wheat that I showed you. I love my Bosch Universal mixer. Now I use this specifically for making bread. I do have a KitchenAid stand-up mixer, and I just found that it couldn't keep up with the volume of bread that we make. So we went ahead and bought the Bosch specifically for bread, and it is a beast. I'll show you how it works. So one of the things with fresh milled wheat is that it is a denser product. So you need to add all of the liquid ingredients to your flour and let it rest. You let it sit for a while so that the flour can start to absorb the liquids that are in the recipe. If you just threw it all in there and started kneading away, the bread just doesn't come out quite as fluffy or soft as you would want it to be. It's usually a denser, heavier loaf. So we're gonna go ahead and mix all of our ingredients except the yeast. We will not add the yeast to it yet. We don't want it to start to rise. So we're gonna add all of our liquid ingredients plus our flour, and then we're just gonna turn it off and let it sit for 30 minutes to an hour. So in the Bosch, we're gonna add 3 cups of warm water, straight out of the tap. Then I am going to add 1 1/3 cup, I prefer avocado oil. Any kind of neutral oil will do. Avocado just tends to be my family's favorite. Now, when you're using the same measuring cup for your oil and your honey, it's best to add the oil first. I'm making bread, sweetheart. And then, when you measure out 1/3 cup of honey in that same measuring cup, the honey is less likely to stick to your measuring cup. See how it just falls right out? Now, because I'm doubling the recipe, I'm gonna do 2/3 oil and 2/3 honey. So we're gonna do that same process one more time. So I've done 1/3 cup of oil twice and 1/3 cup of honey twice, for a total of 2/3 cup oil and 2/3 cup honey. And see how clean that measuring cup comes out? It's always best to do the oil first. Now, I'd like to mention that I do not purchase raw, unfiltered honey when I'm bread making. Because once you cook it in your bread and you heat it up in the oven, it ends up killing off all of the live good bacteria that's in the honey anyway. So I do purchase raw honey, I just don't use it in this situation. Next, we're gonna need 2 teaspoons of salt. Again, because I am doubling it, I'm gonna add 4 teaspoons of salt. Now the recipe calls for 1 egg. We do use our farm fresh eggs from our chickens outside. Because we're doubling it, I'm gonna go ahead and use 2. And then we're gonna go ahead and add the wheat. It does call for 4 cups of flour. Because we're doubling it, that would be 8 cups of flour. I'm gonna start by adding 7 cups because the amount of flour that you need changes day by day depending on how warm or how humid the environment is. Today here in Texas, we're actually having a pretty dry day. So I got about 6.5. I'm definitely going to need to melt just a little bit more wheat. But for what we're doing right now, that will be just fine. I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on because I do try to prevent some messes. You know, while you're waiting for your dough to absorb the liquid and soften a little bit, it's a great time to grab a cup of coffee. Coffee is life. That's how we get through our days around here. We have a very dear veteran friend of ours who actually roasts his own coffee here locally, and his business is wonderful. His coffee is delicious, and there's just nothing better. Third day coffee for the win. Thanks for all you do, JR. I will link his website down below just in case you guys want to check it out. It is truly amazing coffee. All right, so it's been sitting for about 30 minutes, give or take. It doesn't have to be super specific, but you just want to let it sit long enough to start softening up that flour. Some of the honey and oil off my counters. And now it's time to add the yeast. This recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of instant yeast. So I will be adding 2 tablespoons of instant yeast. straight into the bowl. Now, while we were waiting, I took the liberty of milling just a little bit more flour. Let me bring that over and we'll add a little bit more wheat as it mixes. All right. The nice thing about fresh milled wheat is you can always make a little more if you need it. I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and then I'm going to start to show you the consistency that we're looking for. See if I'm brave enough to do it without the lid. We're just going to add a little bit at a time. Woo! All right, sorry guys, I'm not that brave. We have enough natural messes in the house. I don't have to contribute to them. So you see how it's already starting to gather and it's not a big sticky stringy mess. We really don't need much more flour than that. That might even be about it. We're just gonna let it knead for a little while and see how it looks. I know that with traditional store-bought flour, this would still be way too wet, but with fresh milled bread, the last thing you want to do is add too much flour. All right, so it's not nearly done kneading enough, but let's go ahead and check it and see if the consistency is right. So with fresh milled wheat, you want it to be a little bit wetter than it would be with traditional store-bought flour. A little bit sticky. It does stick to my fingers just a tiny bit. There's ways to still work with it later, even when it's like this. And actually, it's almost to window pane. I'll show you what that means. As I'm spreading it thinner and thinner, you see how it's starting to break? I will show you a successful window pane when we get to it. But this won't need to knead much longer. And that's one of my favorite things about the Bosch. With the KitchenAid, this would have easily taken 20 or 30 minutes. And with the Bosch, it'll take between 5 and 8 minutes to get it where I need it to be. You do not want to add too much flour to your fresh milled dough. It still seems a little sticky because it's not completely cleaning off the sides of the bowl. So I may add about a tablespoon of flour to it, but it really doesn't need much more. And that's one of the things you just have to learn when you're learning how to bake bread, is how to read your dough and see what it needs, because it's different from day to day. Now I'm going to try to show you, as it gets incorporated a little bit better, the little bit of flour that I added, the sides of the bowl are getting cleaner and cleaner. So you're not really looking for the dough to be dry, but the sides of your bowl should be pretty much cleaned off to clue you in that you're pretty close to having enough flour in there. It's still a tiny bit wet on the very top, but the rest of the bowl is looking pretty darn clean. I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it alone for a little while and just let it knead away. We'll come back and check it in about 3 minutes. And if I feel like it's still too sticky, we can just add a tiny bit of flour then. But I really think that this is going to be good. All right, I think it's time to take a look. So it's still looking just a little bit shaggy. It should be a bit smoother. And when you take it and very gently pull it apart, instead of tearing like it did right there, it should just get thinner and thinner until you can see light through it. So we're not quite there yet. It's actually a pretty good texture where it's a little sticky, but it's not so sticky that I can't get it off my fingers. So it just needs a little bit longer to knead. We're going to turn it back on. I'm going to go ahead and put the full lid on because it keeps it from kind of coming up here out of the top and not getting properly kneaded. So I'm going to put this on and I'm going to let it go for a little longer. Now, one of the main reasons that I try to keep all of the flour off of my countertops is because the Bosch does have some little rubber feet on the bottom to keep it from sliding around. But one day, I accidentally spilled some flour on the counter and figured I'll just clean it up later. And some of that flour found its way under the feet, and the Bosch started to slide around. The flour prevented it from basically sticking to the counter. And I was not standing right by the machine when this happened. My 6-year-old was walking through the kitchen just as it had rocked itself off of the front of the counter and started to fall to the ground. And his reflexes were so fast that he rushed over and he caught it and he shoved it back up onto the counter. And thankfully, my machine was not injured. And I'm so thankful for my son's fast reflexes in that situation. But now I do try to keep any loose flour picked up so that we don't have a repeat situation. All right, let's check it and see where we're at. Well, it's far less shaggy than it was. You see how much smoother the dough is becoming? When you take it and you pull it apart very gently, you can start to see light. It is tearing just a little bit right there. But when they say window pane, I don't know how well you can see on camera, you can see light and movement behind that. So it could maybe go for about 1 more minute, but this is really close. I think I'm happy with it. When you pull it apart, you really don't want it to tear. You just want it to get thinner and thinner. I'm not being aggressive with it. You can see light behind that. Maybe I'll let it go about 1 more minute because it did tear on that section too. A little bit longer. All right, we're back. Let's take another look at this. I am pretty happy with how elasticy this is. It's not ripping. I can see through it. Or no, you can't see through it, but I can see light through it. We're gonna call this good. So now we need to get it out of the bowl so it has a chance to do its first rise. I'm gonna give it plenty of room. If the dough is ever so sticky that it's hard for you to work with because it likes to attach to your fingers, you can always get your hand wet. If your hand is just a little bit damp, it won't stick to you, but you want to be careful not to add too much moisture to your dough. There's a delicate balance. You don't want it too wet and you don't want it too dry. It's going to go in the bowl. We're going to cover it and we're going to let it rise until it doubles in size, maybe about an hour. We'll come back and check on it. We're just going to have to keep an eye on it. Rise time changes depending on the temperature in your house, how humid it is. There's lots of different things that affect that. So there's no specific time that it's going to need to rise. So just keep an eye on it, and when it is about doubled in size, you'll know it's ready. All right, it's time to take a look at the bread. Here's the bowl we put it in. And it has most definitely doubled in size, if not a bit much. Now it's time to shape it into cinnamon rolls. I'm going to go ahead and clean up and get my counters cleared off so that we can roll out this dough and turn it into some delicious cinnamon rolls. All right, I got my counters all cleared off. Now it's time to put out the dough, roll it out so we can turn it into cinnamon rolls. I'm going to go ahead and put just a little bit of flour on the countertop to try and help keep it from sticking, but you really don't want to overdo this for 2 reasons. You don't want to make your dough tough, and you don't want to end up incorporating so much flour to it that when you roll, it doesn't really stick together. So just a very light coating of flour. Some people prefer to use oil. Oil or flour will do the same thing. You're going to get the same effect. And we're going to go ahead and dump our dough onto the counter. Now, this is one of my favorite tools when I'm making bread. It also happens to be one of my youngest son's favorite toys. He plays with it all over the kitchen like it's a car. And we are just going to gently, oh, we're still just a little too sticky. We're gonna add just some flour, not much, just to make it a little easier to work with. We're gonna start rolling it out. It is definitely a little bit stickier to work with than traditional store-bought flour, but I assure you the more you work with it, you'll get used to it. Now remember, I doubled the recipe, so this is a lot of cinnamon rolls. If I wanted to, I could easily make half of this into cinnamon rolls and the other half a loaf of bread. I could make dinner rolls, I could make hamburger buns, anything I want to. I used the same recipe that I used for my sandwich bread, so I can use this dough for anything I like. But my brother-in-law is in town, and my children love to snack on cinnamon rolls, so I figure I might as well just go ahead and make the whole thing. I'll give you a nice close-up as I kind of get it worked out here. We never used to eat cinnamon rolls. To me, there was absolutely no nutritional value. There was no point except that they tasted good. And I've really tried to teach my kids to eat things that are going to nourish their bodies. And cinnamon rolls, while delicious, were never going to be that. Until I landed on fresh milled wheat. Now, of course, all of the sugar in the icing and inside the actual cinnamon coating that we put in here is still not good for them, but the fresh milled wheat is so good for them that it's something I can live with every once in a while. They don't get these very often. You can see compared to my hand just how much dough this really is. This would have made two 2-pound loaves of bread. So this is going to be approximately 4 pounds of dough for cinnamon rolls. I've got it rolled out pretty thin here. I like it better thin. Now it's time to mix up the cinnamon filling. So here in this bowl, I already have 1 cup of sugar. It's just 1 cup of regular old store-bought sugar. And we are going to add a tablespoon of ground cinnamon. I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. Clean hands. I'm just going to get in there and mix it around. We use our hands a lot in this kitchen. We just make sure to wash them real good with warm soap and water. Warm water and soap? I'm not really sure how you would have warm soap. You get the idea. All right, that's our cinnamon and sugar. I'm gonna go grab the butter. I'll be right back. We keep our butter out on the countertops because we go through enough of it that it really doesn't need to be refrigerated. I'm gonna go ahead and use just a regular old basting brush, and I'm gonna baste most of the dough with butter. You wanna leave an edge without butter so that as you're rolling up your dough into a log, or as you're rolling it up into the cinnamon rolls, that you're able to stick the dough to the end without it releasing. You want it to try to stay rolled. I'm just going to paint butter all over this beautiful, soft bread dough. All right, cinnamon and sugar. You want to go ahead and generously distribute it everywhere the butter is. I like to use these very large glass pans to rise my cinnamon rolls and bake them in. These are not a 9 by 13. Whatever size is next up, that's what this is. What does it say? 10 by 14 is what it says there on the bottom. These are a 10 by 14. These are perfect for my size family. I use these for a lot of things. So I'm going to go ahead and spray them with oil so that the cinnamon rolls don't stick. Again, I prefer avocado oil. You can use whatever your family prefers. Now, the way that I cut my cinnamon rolls is not traditional. The very first time I made cinnamon rolls, I rolled this up into a log, and then I tried to trim the log and cut the log off one cinnamon roll size at a time. And I ended up with a terrible, squishy, triangular-shaped mess. So I thought to myself, why not use a pizza dough cutter? This is what I have done ever since. It doesn't have to be uniform. It doesn't have to be perfect. They're going to be delicious no matter how they come out. Now, if you have a smaller family and there's just no way you need anywhere near this many cinnamon rolls, you can always make up just a single batch of dough, and you can still make rolls or hamburger buns or a loaf of bread, and then just make a few cinnamon rolls out of what you have. Now you're going to take it and you're going to roll, and you want to kind of stretch as you roll. Stretch and roll. This builds surface tension on your dough. The surface tension is important for the way it's going to be able to rise. So as you can see, I hope you can see, I'm stretching it, and then I roll a little bit, and then I pull back and stretch it a little bit until I get near the end. Now I personally love the crazy shapes that I end up with. Stick it together, put it in there, and move on to the next one. Stretch and roll it. I find that because I make this many cinnamon rolls as well, it is really tricky to roll up a whole log and still maintain that surface tension. This is quite a bit of dough that we're working with here. Makes for a pretty decent sized cinnamon roll for breakfast. Just kind of pull and stick. Now that's going to stick a little bit better because I didn't put butter or cinnamon and sugar on there. And if it didn't stick, it still works out. I like to have them close enough that when they rise, they still kind of touch. They don't have to be completely separated from each other. Stretch, roll, stretch, roll. Now I'm just going to continue to do this all the way down until I fill my pans. Traditionally, we used to only eat cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning. It was kind of a Christmas treat, and I would buy them in a can because I was not good at things like this. And I would just open them up in a can and bake them. Boy, is that a whole lot easier. It doesn't take nearly as much time, but I just can't bring myself to continue to feed the family stuff with no nutritional value whatsoever. These do have sugar. They are definitely a nice treat. But at the end of the day, they're still good for them as well. There's still a lot of nutrition in these cinnamon rolls. It really is okay if they come out all different sizes. They still bake up nicely. And then the older kids eat the bigger ones, and the younger kids eat the smaller ones, and it just really works out well. So there's my first tray. They're not perfect. They're not uniform. They're about the same size. That first one's pretty big, but they will all be delicious. Let's continue on and fill the second pan. I'm gonna go ahead and set this one off to the side. We're gonna cover it with a towel and just give it a chance to rise. It does all the rest of the work. All right, now we've got to fill the other pan. There you have it. If I would have cut them a little straighter, I maybe could have gotten a full 2 dozen, but I'm happy with this. And the adults, they'll just eat the bigger ones. The teenagers will definitely eat the bigger ones. They're all gonna be pretty good size though. So now we're just gonna cover them and we're gonna give them anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to rise. You are looking for them to double in size. In the meantime, set the oven to 375 degrees and let it start preheating. All right, it's time for the big reveal. Let's see how they've done. Oh yeah. That one's huge. These are gonna be delicious. All right, it's time to put them in the oven. 375 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. We're gonna set a timer for 20 minutes and check it and see if it needs to go a little bit longer. They're all so unique. All right, guys, it smells so good in here. I don't know if you can hear the alarm going off. Time is up. Let's see what it looks like in here. Oh man, those look so good. Actually, you know what some of them remind me of? When we were little, my parents used to buy fireworks for us from those little booths. It kind of looks like those snakes you set on fire. They got all squiggly. They feel pretty good though. They feel good. Let's go ahead and get them out. I don't think they need another 5 minutes. Let's see. Oh yeah. Definitely, definitely amazing. So I am cracking up. I've actually never had my cinnamon rolls do this. But like this one completely unswiveled and fell over. Look at this guy. Look, this one too. I'm telling you, they remind me of those old fireworks snakes that when you light them, they kind of like grow and fall over and twist. I bet these are a lot more delicious than those would be though. All right, so the next step is to let them cool for about 5-10 minutes. I have found that if I make the icing and I pour it on too soon, it just kind of melts to the bottom of the pan and doesn't really coat the cinnamon roll, and it just doesn't taste as good. So we're gonna let them cool 5, maybe 10 minutes, and then we're gonna start making the icing to pour over them, and then they will be ready to enjoy. All right, so in a bowl, I have 14 ounces of softened butter and 4 ounces of softened cream cheese. Now again, I've doubled my recipe. So for 1 serving, you're going to use 7 ounces of butter and only 2 ounces of softened cream cheese. I went ahead and doubled it, and we're going to cream it together. Then we're going to add about 4 tablespoons of milk. All right, then we're going to add a half a teaspoon of salt. Half teaspoon. And we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. I'm going to go ahead and mix all of that together. Now I may need to add a little bit more milk, but it's better to need more milk than to have too much of it. So I'm just going to kind of wait and see how it pans out. Now, because I doubled the recipe, I'm going to add 3 cups of powdered sugar. A regular recipe only needs 1.5 cups. In the description box below, I will put a single recipe. Now we're going to mix all of this together and see if it needs to be thinned out. I need to get a spatula and scrape the sides. You see how it's not too thick? Enough that it's kind of drippy, but it's not runny. That's kind of the consistency that we prefer. All right, let's get the glaze on these bad boys. They should be just warm enough that they still kind of melt over it, but without completely dissolving to the bottom of the pan.